Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be reacting and breaking down all the Romantasy books that were nominated in the Goodreads Choice Awards. Alright guys, so this is going to be a two-part video. In the first half, I am going to react to the fantasy romance books that were nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards. About 2 weeks ago, I posted my predictions video for the Romantasy Goodreads Awards category, and I'm very curious to see if any of the books I predicted actually made the cut. And then in the second half, I will research all of the different books, and then I will give you a spoiler-free plot synopsis of all of the books that are nominated in case you want to check them out and they sound like a book you might enjoy. So I am very excited about this video, but there are a lot of books to cover. So if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram, Goodreads, and Patreon, all linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's check out the Goodreads nominees. Alright guys, so I have Goodreads open. I have managed to avoid almost all of the spoilers. I only know about 2 books, but just judging by the cover of the Romantasy category, there's already a book I do not recognize, so I have a feeling I did a very poor job of picking my predictions. But with that being said, let's check out these books. Okay, so first up is Fate of the Sun King, which is the 3rd book in the Artifacts of Ornos series. I believe it starts with Trial of the Sun King, which I did enjoy. I am very surprised a book 3 made it on to the nominee list. I feel like typically sequels and like books in series don't do as well, so I definitely did not think that book was going to make it on here. Very surprised by that. Next up is a Fate Inked in Blood. That is a Norse-inspired fantasy romance that I adore. I definitely knew that was going to make it onto this list. That was in my prediction video. Next up is Blood of Hercules. I have no idea what this book is about. I don't think I've ever... Actually, the cover looks vaguely familiar. It looks really cool. I do not know what this book is about, so I'm definitely going to have to look that up before the second half of this video. Obviously, I did not think it was going to make it onto the list because I didn't know about it. And next up is Gold, The Plated Prisoner 5. There's a lot of sequels. I was not expecting books that were like further in series. So I'm actually not mad about Gold. I love the Plated Prisoner series. I think it deserves so much more love. I am not caught up yet because the audiobooks haven't released. But I'm okay with Gold being on here. I didn't guess it, but I'm not mad about it. Phantasma made it on the list. I am so happy for that author. I think she's a debut author, and I loved Phantasma, so that is super awesome. Then we have the Spellshop. I did guess that. I had a feeling that might make it. And then Restless Stars, Zodiac Academy 9. I did not think that was going to make it onto the list. I probably should have, though. However, I just feel like book 9 in a series, I don't think it'll win. I'm actually surprised that many people have read the Zodiac Academy. I feel like it's been getting a lot of negative reviews, like the later books, so I didn't think that was going to make it on here. And next up is a Dark and Drowning Tide. So the only reason I even know what this book is about is because I was supposed to read it in September for the Phantom of the Opera readathon that I did a terrible job co-hosting. I apologize, Maggie. I was supposed to read it, and it had all the tropes that I needed to read, but that is the only reason I even know that this book exists. So another one, I'm very surprised, made it on here. Next up is A Touch of Chaos, Hades and Persephone by Scarlett St. Clair. Although this is the 4th book in the series, I knew Scarlett St. Clair books typically do make it onto this list, so that was in my prediction video. I really wasn't sure about it, so I'm surprised. Then we have Quicksilver. That is 100% getting my vote. I am so relieved it made it on here. I know a lot of my friends that did prediction videos didn't think it was going to make it, and I'm so happy that it did. I was also a little nervous, but that will have my vote. Next up is A Crown This Cold and Heavy. Oh, it doesn't say this is part of a series, but I think this is part of a fantasy romance series. If not, I will tell you in the second half of this video when I research these books, but definitely did not guess that. The Games Gods Play, I did guess that. I think that's either a Red Tower book or it had a Barnes & Noble special edition, and I feel like those books typically do very well. House of Flame and Shadow by SJM. I have a feeling that's going to be the winner. which is kind of disheartening because it's not my favorite SJM book. However, it is SJM and she normally sweeps, so I knew it was going to happen, but kind of, I don't know. I really hope it doesn't win. I feel bad saying that because I love SJM with all my heart, but I feel like she's written better books. And next up, we have The Veiled Kingdom. I had a feeling that was going to make it on here. And then Faebound. I honestly almost had that on my prediction video. I was going between that and one other book, and I really wish I included it. One, because my 20 predictions ended up only being 19. I somehow miscalculated. And also, I honestly had a pretty good feeling this was going to make it on here. I know a lot of my friends really enjoyed this. I feel like it's also more fantasy than fantasy romance. It obviously is a fantasy romance, but the fantasy is very heavy. So I think that's why I was kind of leery about adding it to my predictions video. Ooh, okay. Next up is The Honey Witch. Did not think that was going to make it on here. I feel like it's similar to the Spellshop. Maybe just the covers are similar. I haven't actually read either book. I did not guess The Honey Witch was going to make it on. Then we have Born of Blood and Ash. I knew a Jennifer L. Armentrout book would make it on this list. I am interested to see how well this does. I love the From Blood and Ash series. I'm not sure if this, I think this is part of the companion series of Flesh and Fire. I'll let you know in the second half of this video, but I love Jennifer L. Armentrout, so I love the fact her books are on here. I just think that it's the fourth book in a series, so I'm also not sure how it's going to do, but I am happy that it made it. Then we have When the Moon Hatched. I'm so excited that is on here. And then Apprentice to the Villain, which is so interesting because I was watching prediction videos and so many people put Apprentice to the Villain, and I never read Assistant to the Villain, but apparently it did very well last year on the Goodreads Choice Awards. I think it's like a cozy urban fantasy. So I might have to pick up both books if that many people are really enjoying them. And last up is A Promise of Peridot. I did not think that. So many sequels. I think this is the sequel to Dawn of Onyx that I did enjoy. I just was not expecting it to make it onto this list. So overall, not bad. I think I guessed about 50% of the books. And honestly, I'm pretty okay with this list. Nice job, Goodreads. All right, guys, so let's talk about these books that were nominated. So starting off with The Veiled Kingdom by Renee. This is the first book in a spicy fantasy romance series. In the story, we are following our main character, who is the daughter of a tyrannical and very cruel king. So she decides that she is going to flee the king, her father, and her kingdom. And in doing so, she ends up being captured by this rebel group. They do not realize her true identity. So they give her an ultimatum. Either she can join this rebellion or they will kill her. So she reluctantly joins, and then she begins to garner the attention of the rebel leader's son, Dacre, who is very interested in our main character. And the story goes from there. So overall, I thought this was a very good start to a fantasy romance series. It was my Patreon book club pick, I think for October, and overall, most of us did really enjoy it. I am a little bit worried to pick up the second book. I've heard a lot of mixed reviews, but overall, a very fun story. And next up is Gold, which is the fifth book in the Plated Prisoner series by Raven Kennedy. Now, I can't really get into what Gold is about because it is the fifth book, but if you're unfamiliar with the Plated Prisoner series, in the story, we are following RN, and this is a very loose King Midas reimagining. So RN is Midas's gilded pet. He has gold touched her, and she lives in his castle, pretty much stays in a cage on display, and really has no autonomy. All she cares about is serving Midas, being safe, and drinking. And all of that changes when she has to leave her gilded cage and go to a new kingdom, where she is soon captured, and things progress from there. I love this series so much, just watching Auren go from this broken person to her finding her autonomy and her strength, and I just love her so much, and watching her growth was so, so beautiful. So once again, I am very happy this book made it onto the Goodreads Choice Awards, and I am very excited to continue the series once it is released via audio. And next up is A Touch of Chaos, which I did predict was going to be on this list by Scarlett St. Clair. Now, I can't tell you exactly what A Touch of Chaos is about because it is the fourth book in the series, but A Touch of Darkness is essentially based off of Hades and Persephone, and it is an urban fantasy based in New Athens. And I believe at the start, Persephone has just moved to New Athens, and she's trying to become a journalist, and she ends up in a contract with Hades, the god of the dead, and she has to live in the underworld and make a life there in order to keep her life. And it's their romance. And I remember absolutely loving the first book and then never continuing. So it's another series I really want to get to soon, but I'm very happy Touch of Chaos made the list. And next up is Games Gods Play, and I was right, it is a Red Tower book. I feel like Red Tower books have a very good chance of making it onto the nominee list because they typically have those gorgeous sprayed edges that you see all over Bookstagram and TikTok. So it makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, I have not read this book yet, but it sounds really good. So we're following this girl that lives in a world where there are different gods that control different parts of the earth, and where she lives is ruled over by Zeus. So she's really just trying to get by in life, and all of that changes when Hades decides to enter the Crucible. So the Crucible is this fight to a death where these different gods will pick mortals to represent them in combat, and Hades has selected our main character, and the story goes from there. So it sounds really good, and I'm hoping to pick it up soon. And next up is The Promise of Peridot, which is the sequel to A Dawn of Onyx. If you're unfamiliar with A Dawn of Onyx, it is a fantasy romance following this girl that has the rare magical ability to heal people. And after her brother, who is off fighting in these battles, does something very, very unwise, she is forced to sacrifice herself in order to save him. So she now has to work for this enemy encampment and heal these evil soldiers, and while doing so she meets a fellow prisoner, and the story goes from there. So I am very excited to continue with this series, and I absolutely love that so many people have loved this series enough that the sequel made it onto this nominee list. And next up is The Spellshop. I am not surprised this made it onto the list. A lot of people are reading this, especially around spooky season. So this is a cozy fantasy romance. We are following this woman that used to work in this magical library until it ended up burning down. And then she, along with her sentient plant named Kaz, end up going to her childhood home that she never thought she would revisit and try to start up a new life there. And there's a grumpy neighbor, I think, that becomes a love interest. And it goes from there. So I probably won't be picking this up anytime soon. I'll probably wait until next spooky season just because I feel like it has those vibes. But overall, I am not at all surprised that this is a nominee. Now, I am surprised about the Honey Witch, but the plot synopsis does sound very cute. We're following this witch who is super reclusive and very shy and doesn't really like to go out and socialize. So when she is offered the position of the Honey Witch, she quickly accepts. Now, the only downside to being the Honey Witch is you can never fall in love. Well, then enters a very grumpy neighbor who does not believe in magic, and I'm assuming they strike up a romance despite the fact that she's not allowed to fall in love. And it goes from there. So it sounds very cute and adorable. Once again, I just haven't heard a lot of people talking about this book, but I am very intrigued to see how it does. All right, so this next series I absolutely have to pick up because it seems like all of you really love it. It just didn't seem like a series I would really enjoy. So it is Apprentice to the Villain. The first book is Assistant to the Villain, and I just looked up the synopsis and it said it's perfect for fans of The Office and Once Upon a Time. I'm not exactly sure how those two things can mesh, but I am very intrigued. So the story is essentially just following this girl who ends up really needing a job and becomes an assistant to this very high-powered villain. Apparently it has a lot of really good banter, and I am very curious, so I will definitely be picking this up soon. Next up is A Fate Inked in Blood, which is a Norse-inspired fantasy romance. I'm not surprised at all this made it onto the list. I think I ended up rating it 4.75 stars. I thoroughly loved this book. It was so, so good. If you're a fan of The Last Kingdom, it kind of has those vibes. But in the story, we are following a woman, I'm pretty sure her name's Freya, but I could be mistaken, and she is in a loveless marriage, and this becomes very apparent when her husband essentially gets her into this fight to the death with a Viking warrior. Now, during this fight, Freya shows that she actually has a drop of goddess blood, and she is able to shield herself, and then all of the other Vikings want to use Freya for their own means. And it's really a story of Freya trying to find her own autonomy, and also there's a bit of a romance that happens. And overall, I really loved it. The ending definitely reminded me of From Blood and Ash a little bit. So overall, highly recommend if you have not picked it up yet. Okay, so this next book is not the book that I thought it was. So next up is Faebound. I definitely was mistaking this book for another book, but I just looked up the plot synopsis and it looks really, really good. So the story is following these two elven sisters. One of them is a warrior. I think the other one doesn't have a profession. And after a mistake causes one of the sisters to be exiled, the other one comes along and they end up in the Fae world, which they did not believe actually still existed. And they have to navigate the life with the Fae, and the story goes from there. So I am very curious. Let me know if you guys have read this. It seems like a lot of people really enjoyed it if it's on this nominee list, so I will hopefully be picking it up soon. Moving on, next up is Phantasma. I am so happy this book made it onto the nominee list. This is a dark fantasy romance that's very reminiscent of Caraval by Stephanie Garber, except the consequences are much more dire. So in this story, we are following a girl that after the sudden death of her mother, she inherits her mother's necromancy abilities. Now, on top of that, she also finds out that her and her sister are about to lose the home that they have been living in because of money troubles. So the sister has taken it upon herself to enter Phantasma, which is a deadly competition where there is only one survivor, and that survivor is granted a wish, and all of the different levels are based off the different levels of hell, and it's just very, very dangerous. So our main character ends up deciding to enter the competition in order to save her sister, and the one rule is never fall in love in Phantasma. And the story goes from there. I absolutely loved it. It has OCD and intrusive thought rep that I thought was done very, very well, so highly, highly recommend. And another book I am so thrilled made it onto the nominee list. We have When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. This is another top fantasy romance read of the year for me. I love this book. However, I am terrible at summarizing what this book is about. So essentially, we're following this girl that is part of this rebellion group, and she ends up being captured while she is trying to take down somebody. And while all this is going on, we are also following another character who is trying to collect dragon shards from a dragon that fell from the sky. He ends up finding our main character in prison, and together they end up teaming up to do other adventurous things. And it goes from there. It is so hard to talk about this book without giving away spoilers, mostly because of the writing. The writing is done in such a way that it's very whimsical, very verbose, but also it is not straightforward. So as you are reading, it's almost like you're trying to solve this puzzle and put all the clues together. And there's a lot of things that I don't know if they're going to be relevant in the next book or spoilers for the next book, which is why I try to keep that summary very, very brief. But overall, I absolutely adored When the Moon Hatched and cannot wait to read the sequel. And next up is Born of Blood and Ash, which is the fourth book in the companion series to From Blood and Ash, Flesh and Fire. Now, this series follows Serafina and Nyktos. I am not caught up yet, but I really want to get to this book soon. Now, if you are new to From Blood and Ash and the companion series, I highly recommend reading them in publication order. So don't even pay attention to what series or what book is in what series. Just read the books as they released, and I feel like that is the best way to fully immerse yourself in the story. But overall, I am very excited to get caught up, and I really hope I love this next book. All right, so according to Goodreads, this next book is a dark fantasy romance, but I wouldn't have guessed that based on the cover or the plot synopsis. So it is Blood of Hercules. Now, I don't know very much about this. I believe we're following a girl who finds out that she actually has the blood of Hercules, and because of this, she has to join this Spartan university and train to become an elite warrior, and I think her professors are like different gods, and then she's also being stalked while all this is going on. So it definitely sounds like it has potential. I am just so curious because I've never heard of this book, so I'm wondering if it's really popular on like Book Talk or Bookstagram, or I just completely missed the memo about it. But I might end up picking this up in December, so let me know if any of you have read it. What did you end up rating it? And next up is book 9 in the Zodiac Academy. Now, I am not caught up. The last book I read was book 8. I'm pretty sure book 9 is the last book or the second to last book. So I am very interested. I do plan on eventually reading this. It is just such a chunky book, and I've been kind of annoyed with this series because it keeps dragging on. So I haven't picked it up yet, but I will in the future. But if you're unfamiliar with the Zodiac Academy, the first few books are some of my favorite books on this planet. I have a full spoiler-free series review that I will leave in the cards and the description. Now, I will say the writing is not the best, but the romances and relationships and friendships are just so, so good. So if you're unfamiliar with the plot, we are following the Vega sisters, Darcy and Tori, and they have lived a very impoverished life. They really only have each other to depend on. And on their 18th birthday, a vampire shows up and tells them that paranormal creatures are real. They are actually fae, and not only are they fae, they are fae royalty. And they can gain a fae royalty inheritance if they go to the Zodiac Academy. So the girls agree, and when they get to the Zodiac Academy, they soon find out that there are already these 4 celestial heirs that are ruling the school that do not want these Vega nobles kind of encroaching on their domain. So the first book is very much a bully romance, and then it really shifts and just becomes so epic and amazing, and I absolutely love it. Once again, the writing leaves a lot to be desired. It is not the best, but if you can just get past that, the story is so, so good. And next up is A Dark and Drowning Tide. So this is a Gothic fantasy romance, and in this story, we are following a group of people that were sent by a king to try to find a magical spring that is filled with some sort of unknown power. So while this group is searching for the spring, the leader ends up being murdered, and I think they're trying to uncover who the murderer is, so there's a lot of distrust and things like that in the group, and apparently there is a romance. I believe it is a sapphic romance, but I'm not positive. and the story goes from there. So I am very intrigued. Like I said, I had this on my TBR in September. I just never got around to it. So I might still pick it up, but once again, I am very shocked it made it onto the Goodreads Choice Awards just because I never hear people talking about this book. All right, so we made it to the final four. Next up is Quicksilver by Kelly Hart. I recently read this. I gave it 5 stars. I think it is worth all of the hype. It is a dark fantasy romance with amazing found family and banter, and it is so unbelievably good. So in the story, we are following this girl that after a very upsetting and tragic event, she is wounded and accidentally opens up a portal to a Fae realm where a mysterious and gorgeous Fae springs up, takes her, heals her, and brings her to his realm. Now, when she is there, she finds out that she is bonded to this brooding Fae, and also that she can manipulate a certain magical property. And the story really goes from there. But it is so, so good. Highly, highly recommend the audiobook. I feel like the narrators did such an amazing job. But overall, it definitely has my vote. And next up is Fate of the Sun King, which is actually the 3rd book in the Trial of the Sun King series. Now, I did read the first book. I ended up not loving it. I think I gave it 3 stars. But if you like fantasy romance with deadly trials, I would definitely give it a shot. I know a lot of people love this series, which is probably why the 3rd book made it onto this list. But if you're unfamiliar with the plot, we are following this girl. I believe her name is Lore, and she has been living under the rule of the Aurora King, and she's lived a pretty terrible life, which is why she is shocked when she's taken to the Sun King's kingdom. And when she gets there, she finds out that she is going to have to fight against 9 other women who are tributes in order to gain the favor of the Sun King, and the story goes from there. So overall, I probably will not continue with this series, but if that plot sounds good to you, highly recommend checking it out. And next up is A Crown This Cold and Heavy, which is the 3rd book in the Legacy of Lies series, which starts with A Court This Cruel and Lovely. Now, I did read the series, or the first book in the series, earlier this year, and unfortunately I forget most of it. I never continued after the first book. But the first book is following this girl, who I think her name is Lore, but I'm not positive, and she lives in a world where when you are born, you have to give your power to the gods, and if you keep your power, you are seen as corrupt. And if it turns out that you kept your power and you still held on to it later in life, you are then killed. So our main character is one of those people that was able to keep her power. However, she has been living in hiding ever since, and she keeps having dreams of this guy with green eyes, like standing above her. So anyway, when one day she is out, she accidentally shows that she has this power and has to flee from her community only to run into the guy she's been dreaming about. And the story goes from there. So I am once again very surprised that the 3rd book in a series did make it onto this list. But once again, I am very interested to see how many rounds that it stays. And the final book is House of Flame and Shadow, which is the 3rd book in the Crescent City series by Sarah J. Maas. I am almost positive this is the book that is going to end up winning the entire fantasy romance category just because it is Sarah J. Maas and she has such a huge following. Now, I was not a huge fan of this book. I really can't go into it just because it will give away spoilers, but overall, I feel like there was quite a tone shift in this 3rd book. I also wasn't crazy about the main characters we were following. There were 2 characters I adore with all my heart, and I will read a full book on their romance. Unfortunately, they were not the main characters of this book, and also some of the side characters I just felt were a little bit boring. So overall, I didn't love the 3rd book, but I know a lot of people really, really did. So if you're unfamiliar with Crescent City, it is Sarah J. Maas's most recent fantasy romance series. It is an urban fantasy set in Lunathian. We are following Bryce Quinlan, who is a half-fae, half-human, and after a tragedy takes place, she, along with Hunt Athalar, who is a fallen angel, have to work together to try to solve a murder, and the story goes from there. Overall, I did love Crescent City 1. Crescent City 2, I despised, and I was not a fan of Crescent City 3. So I'm really hoping the series gets better as it continues, but we shall see. All right, guys, those were all the fantasy romances that were nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards. Please let me know down in the comments below. Do you think there are any books that should have been on the list that didn't make it? And I'd like to say a special thank you to my Paladin protectors, Amanda, Erin, Leslie, Kat, and Lotta. Thank you guys so much for supporting my channel. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye!